Hi, I'm Clint Maddock. I'm manager of software engineering at BluePrint Automation. I want to talk to you about setting up a new product code on the Spyder 200i. So if you want to set up a new product code, the easiest way is to pick a product code that is already very similar to what you're running. So if you want to run a small bag product code, pick a small bag product code. If you want to run a big bag, pick a big bag. So what you would do is go over to the screen and select up here. So the first thing you're going to do is copy an existing product code. So you go in here, copy, and you can, let's say we're going to select that one. You can hit enter, select, copy recipe, and then find a location where you want to place the recipe. Place it there, confirm the location, yes, and you've now copied the recipe. So what you would do now is go into that recipe and change whatever is applicable. So let's just walk through. So let's go ahead and edit a recipe and go in here and select that new recipe I just copied. Go ahead and select it. Now you can go through and you can change the description of that product code, how many bags per minute it's running. Next, you would go through the case. Set up, enter in millimeters, the length, the width, the height, the bottom flap length. So sometimes you have short flaps that are on the bottom or the top. You want to measure the flap length and enter that. So bottom flap length, top flap length. There's also a case reference wall offset. So if your case, because the wall adjustment uses the length and width of the case to determine where the wall should be set, and due to corrugate differences, sometimes you may have to offset that so that the KD gantry will pick it up correctly. So go ahead and enter your case dimensions. Next, go to the loading RAM. Honestly, typically you don't have to change any of these. So I would, in the beginning, don't change any of them, but you can have your retract position, how far you want it to go back. Do you want to delay before you push into the case? How much do you want to compress when you're pushing the product into the case? There's a reference here. That's the RAM servo position. It'll tell you where the RAM servo is at all times. Loading speed, how fast the robot will, how fast the RAM will move into the case. Accel, decel, retracting, how quickly it'll come out. And you can play a lot of games with these if you need to run faster. Maybe you'll speed up the pushing or retracting. But long story short, use the initial settings and then make adjustments after that. There's a tilt feature where you can enable RAM tilt, and it will actually tilt the cassette back and will allow your bags to rest at an angle against the pusher RAM, and then right before it's ready to push, the cassette will come back up and push the bags into the case. Right now we're not using that on your machine, but it is there. Next thing is the cassette. So again, if you already have these set from another product, you probably don't even touch them. Width during loading offset, so sometimes you may want to have the width a little wider than the case or a little narrower, and this allows you to offset that. Delay extending the width, sometimes for various reasons. Right now they're set for 0 to extend and retract, but if you're playing with how you want the bags to settle before you push, sometimes some of these delays can help. This is the cassette servo position, tells you the actual position, cassette load speed and unload speed, so how quickly the case width cassette will open and close. Again, typically don't change these. Case tipper. Case tipper, one thing you'll notice is many of the settings are grayed out. You get to see what they are, but they're already calculated, so you really can't change those. Probably the biggest thing that you might want to change is the handoff speed offset. So there's a little question mark here. Basically what it allows you to do is by moving faster in or slower, it allows you to handle skewing. So if you read this, it'll tell you, hey, if you want to skew, if it's too far forward, speed up, add a positive to that. If it's too far back, put a -% to that. One thing to keep in mind is whenever you do this, it also can affect the kicking of your case. So make small changes to this until the case is not skewed, and beware that you may have to also offset your kicker at the same time. So full case exit, delay before tipping a case. So if you push into a case, there's a delay before tipping it back. How long do you want to be tipped back? Case clear to tilt delay. So when the tipper is moving back, it waits to a certain position to start tipping back. So maybe you want to delay that too. Full case exit clear. Once you load a case on the tipper, before it moves into a sealer, this gives a delay. So if you're trying to avoid having too many cases in the sealer at the same time, you can use that. Case sealer top tape offset. So the top and the bottom tape offset is if you have the tape not centered on your case, you can raise or lower the tapers in order to get them centered. Height and width offset. So your machine knows the case dimensions, so it uses these, and depending on, sometimes you may want to have the width smaller to get a better bite on the case to move it through, or maybe you're crushing the case, so you want to open it up a little bit to allow the tipper to go, or the case to go through the sealer. Kicker. There's kicker offset. We talked about it before. It uses the kicker basically follows the tipper position. If you find that you want to kick, say, sooner, if you add a positive value, you will kick sooner. And then obviously a negative, it'll kick later. Upper major kick delay and lower major kick delay, there are major folders that are in the sealer, and let's say you're having a problem with cases getting jammed in there. Your best course of action is to go ahead and videotape that area, and if you have to delay any of these or reduce the delay, you can do that. But typically these are set at the factory and you're not going to have a real problem with them. So next item would be the conveyors. So acceleration conveyor. You can adjust the acceleration conveyor. You want to make sure your bags come completely into the collation belt, but don't bounce off the backstop. You want them, so you can play with that. Vacuum motor speed, that is for picking the bags. Sometimes if the vacuum motor speed is very high, you'll distort your bags. And also, there's some energy savings if you want to run it a little slower. Seal check conveyor, that you typically don't have to change, but there is an adjustment for it if you'd like to change it. Next item is the gantry. For the gantry, or actually, let's go back. That's really the robot. So there's the gantry and the delta. So starting with the delta, you can, again, if you're copying a product code, I wouldn't change these at all initially. But for picking, you can change the pick excel, pick decel, the speed, the dwell time. Let's say you had a bag that was very difficult to pick up. You might want to dwell on there and allow it to pick up. Placing, excel, decel, speed, dwell time. Dwell time in the placing is typically important because if you find that you're placing bags and then as you release them, they're still coming up with the Delta robot, you may want to increase this delay time. The gantry, let's go back to the Delta. There's also with the picking, there's pick offsets. So if you find that when the bags are going into the collation belt, you're picking up an extra bag or you're missing a bag, you can go into pick offsets and you could vary the X, Y, and Z of the picking so that you can pick the bag correctly. And if you're not sure what X is, this is the bags coming in, you press this and an arrow comes in, shows you where X is, shows you where Y is, Z is. So the offset's there to make sure you pick the bag correctly. The retreat offset is so that when you pick a bag that you don't disturb the bag before it. So what it does is picks up, instead of picking straight up, it moves further down the belt in the X direction and moves up. So typically, again, if you've copied a product code, you're really not going to have to change those much, but they're there. For the gantry, same thing. You're picking a gantry, so there's an accel, a decel, pick speed, dwell time, pick X offset and Z offset. Pick X, you want to make sure, like we said on one of the videos, is that you want to make sure that the case is on the correct spot on the gantry head. So by changing the X position, you can make sure that you're correctly aligned with the case. And if you're not sure what the X and Z is, go to the coordinate preview, and same as before, it'll tell you, hey, X is this way, Z is this way. Placing, same thing, accel, decel, dwell time. X offset and Z offset, those are used to make sure that you can place correctly in the tipper. The Z offset, if you find yourself where sometimes the case is not sitting on the tipper correct, it'll be sitting on the tipper correctly sometimes, but not another. Maybe you're not going down far enough, so the suction cups are picking it up at different times. So maybe you would you'd look in the coordinate preview and say, well, Z is up and down, so Z is positive. So if I want to go further down, placing on the tipper, instead of positive, I would add a negative to that, and you could add negative 10 millimeters, whatever you need. For the opener arm, there's also opening arm positions and speeds. Typically you don't have to change those, but opening arm placing, what's important with that is when you open a case and you're closing the back of it, you want to make sure that the case is square so that the folding you don't have interference when folding. So by modifying this, you can change the position or how square the box is, and that will help you with closing the case and also placing it on the tipper. Next is the collation belt. Again, you typically don't have to change these, but if you're trying to get more speed or you're trying to play with the bags collating on the belt correctly, you've got index speed, accel, decel, index delay. That's typically the one you may have to change. By raising the delay allows the bags to settle into the pocket longer and allows a better transfer. The caveat is that if you're trying to run fast, you may start falling behind. Number of belt pockets, so let's say we send you a new belt, you have to count the number of pockets and put that on there, and what the program does is divide the length of the belts divided by how many pockets and knows how far to index. Flight offset, if you find that you're not collecting correctly and say you want to move your pocket further back or further ahead in order for your bag to sit in there correctly, go ahead and you can adjust the offset to move it further back or ahead. And typically you'd want to rehome that before you or after you do that to make sure that it's taken. Let's see. Next thing is bag. So enter your bag dimensions, length, width, height, and weight. So the machine uses that to try to determine if we had a seal check, how high. It also uses that to know, for the robot to know where to pick it, because if it knows the width and the length, it assumes where it's going to be on the collation belt and figures out how to pick it. Okay, this is the layers. So how many layers you have, how deep are the bags, and how many rows. So sometimes you'll do double rows. I think in this machine, we're only doing one row. And how many bags you're going to pick, bags per pick. Layer parameters, if for whatever reason you want to individually modify each layer, you can move the X, Y, and Z of each layer. Typically you would use this maybe on the first 2 or 3 layers if when you're placing the delta, the bags in the cassette, maybe the vacuum hose is interfering with the pusher ram, so you may want to drop the first 2 or 3 layers so you could raise the Z up a little higher. This is machine settings. So there are 9 settings for the machine. Each one, the bagger guide, the left bagger guide, the right, the seal check. If you're not sure what any of them are, press this button and there'll be a picture and it'll show you where it is and what the number is. That concludes setting up a new product code.